Welcome to Learn the Sword. A lot of students ask, what is the best size of bokuto, or you might know as bokken, should I use? There are tons of pieces of wood out there. Lengths that are longer, lengths that are shorter, lengths that are fatter, smoother, thinner. You have tons of different ways. Everything from a broomstick to a 2x6 that you can whittle down into a heavy sword, a heavy wooden sword. Because a lot of the heavy wooden swords are used like bats. You take 3 or 4 bats together and you swing them around and makes that single bat feel real light when you go hit a home run. Same thing with swording. A lot of times before practice, they put 2 or 3 swords together, go through a little bit of movement, so when they get over to bamboo, it feels nice and light and you can hit the target really, really well. But away from that, there are lots of different bokken or bokuto you can get throughout the world. Every wood is unique in its own patterns and ways. Soft woods, they don't last too long. Medium hardwoods, they're really, really beautiful to look at. But hardwoods are the best for striking another hardwood object, just because you won't have any cracks or you won't find any knots in the wood that will break, and that happens a lot. Now at the very beginning, when you look for a bokuto or bokken, you'll probably want to go with something like a hickory or oak. Everybody likes oak. You'll probably find an oak one, a white oak one or a dark oak one. Well, this one is a white oak one. This is made by Century Martial Arts. It's our action flex and our logo on it. And this is really good for a beginner. Works in really, really nice, and it's a little heavy. And then you ask, well, how heavy should the sword be? Let's just put it this way. If you have 2 bokuto, and one's a heavy one, one's a light one, use the light one for repetition and use the heavy one as a little bit slower movement. For example, if you had a Ferrari sports car, you could careen around those corners. But if you're driving a big, huge Mack truck, you got to go carefully around those corners. Same thing with a heavy sword. Because what happens is if you start manipulating this too hard and too fast, your muscles aren't strong enough and they won't handle they just won't handle it, and then you'll get an injury. So Century makes pretty good bokken. They work well, they're nice stock, and they come in a few different colors and sizes. So when I said we have a big one like this one that's a little heavier, we also have a lighter one. You can see it's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit thinner, but it fits in nicely. So say you're 22 years old, I need this one. But say you're 50 years old and you go, if I use this one and I need to use 3,000 repetition, because repetition is all about swordsmanship. If you don't practice over and over, you're not going to get to it, like anything. If you don't practice tennis, you're not going to hit it over the net, and you're not going to become a world champion. Nevertheless, if you go to a lighter bokken, when you're a little older, you're able to get in there and move it without hurting your shoulders and your elbows. Now, here's another important part. A lot of us that are a little bit older, we have shoulders that hurt. And you try to lift the sword above your head and it just doesn't really work for you. If you're past that age, or if you have injuries where you can't lift it above your head, we have to go into alternate aspects. And we might go into another stance. So if you can't lift it above your head because of injuries, then lift it to a hostile position and then cast it out that way if you can. Remember, when it comes to injuries, most everybody stops. In Japan, you get an injury, they work around it. It's that simple. A while ago, I got a dislocated finger, or it was a broken knuckle. I don't know what it is, but it still doesn't bend. Doesn't hurt as much now. And what happens is every time I move it, I can't get the steering now because of this injury. Well, take away the hand that hurts and start working with one hand. Because when it comes down to it, in real Japanese philosophy, is boys hold the sword with 2 hands, men hold it with 1. And that's just the way it is. So now we're thinking, well, what is the best sword for you, or what's the best maker? Well, of course, Century makes the Action Flex that we have 2 sizes, which work in nicely. But if you want something a little bit more special, there's a guy named Jim Reisinger. He's over in California. Great student, great martial artist. but he makes wood tools or wood weapons as a hobby. He does some really, really cool stuff. For example, this is his bokken or bokuto. You notice there's a little handle movement right there. I don't see that too often. As a matter of fact, you don't see that anywhere. But that's the cool thing about him. He's able to construct a short sword like this. Now, this should be a little bit longer, but most everybody's ceilings are a little too low, and if you're practicing in an apartment, this works excellent. So this is sort of like the short version of a rifle, more like a carbine. So what we do now is the handle's long, and if you have big hands that you want to fit it, it feels nice. And remember, if it fits your hands well, you'll practice even more, and that's the secret. So lifting my hands here and lifting it up and throwing it out, it feels really, really nice. I would suggest if you want something custom made like this, where you can have different angles and different handles and you can adjust it right to your hand, Jim's the way to go. Although there's another person, his name's Dan. He has a whole complete line of very great exotic woods. And when I say exotic, I can't even pronounce the names. Just give me a piece of oak, I'll go crazy. He gave me some of his wood swords that are so hard that you could beat it on cement all day long and they won't even get a blemish. That's simple. I'll show you one. This is it. This is one of the nicest bokuto I've ever come across. It is so solid and so heavy, and it has such a good feel that I can't help but tears come to my eyes when I suggest this bokuto to other people. It's just great stuff. And moreover, it fits perfectly, perfectly balanced. And it wasn't even made to me. It was given to me just because I use a lot of bokuto, which is really, really nice. Now you're thinking to yourself, well, shouldn't I find a different type of wood? This is a little green and it's a little off color, depending on what you like. There are some really good hardwoods that are all black. For example, I had a student maybe 10 years ago. He was a colonel in the Air Force, and he made this for me. If you look right down the edge, it's a little bit wavering because you know this was made out of a chunk of wood that is so hard that it's hard to just sand it down. This is what I usually use when I'm practicing against somebody, because when they hit this, they hit something hard. And when you hit something hard and you know it, you know how to follow through.